So we heard just a moment ago Jesus teaching that we should not murder, just like the law says, but also that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you'd be liable to judgment. In a moment, I'm going to be reading from Paul's letter to the Romans, where Paul told the early church, and he's telling us to live in harmony with one another. But it strikes me that Jesus in Matthew is talking about living in harmony with oneself. If our actions are good, but we're a mess on the inside, that's not being in harmony with ourselves, right? But Jesus wants us to be in harmony with our heart and body, in harmony with spirit and mind. And so it's not enough to just not harm someone. If we're harming them in our heart or our mind, then that is also bad. Now, I want to show you a picture, but with all apologies to our painters, and we have some very good painters and some very good teachers of painting here. You may roll your eyes, I don't know, but Bob Ross, right? I used to love to watch Bob Ross. He'd take a smudge and then suddenly it'd become a beautiful tree or mountain or something, but I don't know Bob Ross as a painter or his paintings really. I don't, and so I do apologize to you, but I love to watch him because I love to hear him talk. It was amazing to hear him talk. His tone of voice, his words were always so encouraging, so kind. And I always found inspiration in that. Now, you may not know this about Bob Ross, and he's talking about a happy little tree over there, right? Happy little trees, happy little clouds. That was something that he did. Those of you who didn't see, it was the joy of painting. It was on PBS for many years. You may not know this about him, but he was in the Air Force. And he was, I understand, he was a drill sergeant, actually. Can you believe that? But he said that he was, in his own words, he was the guy who had to be mean and tough. He was the guy who makes you scrub the latrine. He was the guy who makes you make your bed, the guy who screams at you for being late to work. Now, can you picture that based on, the TV show and hearing him talk? So he decided when he got out of the military that he would never scream at anybody again. And so he found the persona that he was. Now, this is not a criticism of our military. We're grateful for those who serve. But for him, he found that in that role, he was not living in harmony with himself. Do you see that? He was not living out who he was in his role there. And he had to find who he was, to live out who he was on the inside in his spirit and his soul as God made him outwardly. And so we get our happy little trees and our happy little clouds and his wonderfully big hair. Now, speaking of being happy, look, in my efforts to understand human nature and studying Scripture, studying God, studying people, what I have learned is that happiness seems to come to those people who have great relationships. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, there are people who have everything, but they're miserable. Have you seen that or heard about that? And so it's great relationships in our lives that help us to be happy people. Not the amount in our bank account, not the stuff we have, the people that follow us on Twitter or in real life, It's the relationships. It's living in harmony with God, with ourselves, and with others that matters. Generally, this is going to lead us to a life of inner peace and to a life that is happy, whether our circumstances are ideal or not. And so, having said all of that, as sort of a preamble here, I'd like to look at Paul's letter to the Romans, the 12th chapter. So let's look at that together. Listen now for the word of the Lord. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Extend hospitality to strangers. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Do not repay anyone evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay," says the Lord. No, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. For by doing this, you will heap burning coals on their heads. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Sort of a long list of things the church is to be about, isn't it? It's kind of hard, it might seem, to live up to. I'm reminded of last week when we talked about encouraging one another. We might need to continue encouraging each other as we try to live up to these standards that Paul and the early church and that Jesus was teaching us. But today we're talking about living in harmony with one another. Live in harmony with one another, Paul said. And I have to tell you, living in harmony with others is not easy. Do I have to tell you that? There are many times living with myself is not easy. Within myself, I could be flooded with various emotions at the same time, conflicting emotions, right? I mean, probably we all experience that. How do we even begin to be in harmony with ourselves, much less with the people around us? And when we look around us today and we saw the differing perspectives and the different interests from others, it gets tricky, doesn't it? Reminds me of a comic strip, a Peanuts comic strip. Linus is running down the sidewalk and his fingers extended and he goes bang, bang. And Charlie Brown sees him. It looks like fun, so he starts running behind Linus and he says, "Cops and robbers?" "Nope," says Linus. "Cowboys and Indians?" "Nope," says Linus. And Linus responds, "Liberals and conservatives." And the sad thing about that is, really, there was a time when that joke was funnier than it is now. But it's a little too close to home, isn't it, these days? It's just sad. There's so much division in our country, in our society, in the world. There are fundamental differences in how we see things. And so how do we possibly live in harmony today? How do we do it? I don't know, maybe this division shouldn't surprise us. Jesus told us that it would not be for us as it is with others. You remember he told his disciples, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. It will not be so among you." It will not be so among you. "Whoever wishes to be great among you must be your servant." And so he was teaching us to live humbly with one another, which certainly enables or helps us to live in harmony with one another. For Paul, living in harmony was also attached to living in humility or being humble. Remember, right after he says, live in harmony with one another, he also adds, do not be haughty. Do not claim a greater wisdom than you have. Humility. Humility is necessary for living in harmony. And I believe that all of this is a great basis, a great pillar in the life of the Christian community. How else are we to be if we cannot be in harmony in this place with one another? And that's what we've been talking about. That's what we're talking about this month, these ways that Paul teaches us to relate to each other as the church. We're not talking about everybody now. I mean, there are some things going on out there we shouldn't be in harmony with, right? We're not to be in harmony with injustice or evil. But in here, we are to be in harmony with each other. We are to live in harmony with one another. Not always easy. Not always easy. And we're talking about these one another's that Paul wrote about in the New Testament. He's writing all these letters to the early churches, and he gave them instruction. Last week, he told us to encourage one another. And so we were reminded that when we come to church, it's a place to be encouraged and to encourage others, that we need encouragement as we live out our lives. If we don't find a place to be reminded that what we do makes a difference, that we're about something bigger than ourselves, then where will we find encouragement? And we also talked about the fact that this is mutual. It's one another. Encourage one another. If I come to church just to be encouraged and then I just go like a consumer, right? Well, then I haven't encouraged back. I haven't encouraged you. It's a mutual thing. You encourage me, I encourage you, we encourage each other together, and we build each other up for service and witness in the world. And so it's the same way with living in harmony. I mean, we can't live in harmony if I'm determined to live in harmony with you, or you're not with me, or vice versa, right? We have to be determined that we're going to live in harmony with one another. And so we can do this. We also talked last week about the fact that, that really what we're doing here with these one another's is practicing peacemaking in this place. And I believe that all the things that Jesus tells us to do and the Bible tells us to do, the church is a safe place to practice those things. It's a lot easier to think about living in harmony here, I would guess, than it is in some of the places we go in our daily, weekly lives. I hope it is. I hope this is a safer place to practice these spiritual skills that we know we're to be about out there, but we don't necessarily know how to. So we practice them here, and we hone them here, and we build up these spiritual muscles here in church in a safe place so that we can go to serve in the world where it's not always so safe. And we can practice living in harmony here, even if not out there, because we have a lot in common. We have a common tradition of Reformed faith here at the church. We have a common theology. We may not agree on every single matter. That's okay. But we have a common theology. We have a common worship style. Some of us might have some preferences over others in worship. But we're kind of used to the way that we worship together. And the biggest and most important bond that we have is we have a common faith and a common belief that God became human, lived among us, died on our behalf, and rose again, and reigns in power now for and over us. And when you have that in common, friends, then everything else is kind of trivial. We are free to disagree. You see that? Because we hold certain things in common that are so important to us, that are the bonds of our faith, the bonds of who we are as community. Some of the other little things we can disagree with and agree to disagree. I think that is a beginning to living in harmony with one another. And I really love that phrase, live in harmony. Because we're talking about living out our lives with one another. This is life together. Paul is talking about here. Live in harmony. We live together. We live in the community together. We come together and live out our lives in church. And then go out together, live out our lives of faith, but we're still connected to each other, praying for each other, encouraging one another. Sometimes we see each other in the community, right? This is a living out of our daily lives. We're helping each other to be a part of these great things that we believe God is doing somehow through us. And then in harmony is working together. It's being in unity, not uniformity. Again, you don't have to agree on every little thing, but unity. Unity. Humble unity. And so we can practice that here in this place. We can practice living in harmony, because living in harmony doesn't just happen, right? We have to be intentional about that. We have to try. We have to try to learn to live in harmony. And I think that we can do that here. I think that we can and do serve one another in harmony here. Serve each other in harmony. I think that we do worship together in harmony. I know our choir can sing in harmony. Can I get an amen for that? We can share meals like our fellowships and picnics in harmony. We can pray with our hearts in harmony with each other, as we will do in a few moments. This is practicing living in harmony. There's so many other amazing ways that we will learn to do that together, that God will teach us. And I know it's hard to take that out there. It's hard to take living in harmony out there. And there are times when it might not be our call to be in harmony with what's going on out there. And that's okay too. Sometimes that's not our call. But in here, we're to live in harmony. Take it out there where we can. And here is one instance where we'll have an opportunity to take living in harmony in the church out into the community. And I'm so excited about this. This week, Peg is one of the leaders of our garden team, right? Our Coho garden team. Peg Falls Corbett and I had a conversation with Philip Fletcher of Coho. And this is just really exciting. So many of you know about this. You're a part of this garden team putting together our community garden, and you're going to hear more about this very, very soon. But we're building a community garden on our grounds. And it's going to be so exciting, and this is going to be a wonderful thing for us. It's going to be a great thing for our community. But this is about what Coho is already doing in the community. This is about us coming on board and being a part of that. And if you're not familiar with Coho, this is City of Hope. They have a presence on 3 of our neighborhoods in Conway. They're offering hope where hope is needed for sure. And a lot of our conversation with Peg and Philip and I, we were talking about how do we partner in ministry. That was the question. How do we partner in ministry? Because it's easy to say, okay, we're going to build this garden together, and it's going to be cool, it's going to be wonderful, and we're going to have vegetables, and it's going to be great. But what do we do with that? How is that helping us work together to live in harmony, build ministry relationships that transcend just one project? How is this going to help transform our community? It's going to do that through relationship. And so I'm really excited. Philip's going to be here in a few weeks on March 5th. He's going to be here in the pulpit preaching. I'm going to be here that day. It's going to be wonderful to turn that over to him and hear what he has to say and begin building this relationship that so many of you have been building for a while, right? I want to honor that, but we as a church are more intentionally entering into that relationship now, and that's really exciting. Really exciting to see what God will do with that. That's living in harmony. That's learning to live in harmony. It doesn't just happen. It happens intentionally. So we'll nurture our relationship with each other. We'll nurture our relationship with Coho and see what God does with that, right? So I know that God will take us to exciting places if we strive to live in harmony with each other, and if we strive to find appropriate places and venues as a church to live in harmony with other partners in our community, to build relationship, to do ministry alongside each other, and to transform our community and the world. You know, if we live in harmony, God can do amazing things through us in our lives and through this church. I believe that. Don't you? Somewhere in there, friends, I think there's a little glimpse of the kingdom of heaven, don't you? And I'm excited about it. I hope you will be too.